Ma'am, if you don't vacate this seat immediately, we will have you forcibly removed in handcuffs." Naomi Hayes calmly closed her laptop as a deafening silence fell over the first-class cabin. Every eye turned toward her. Standing in the aisle was a smirking, red-faced executive who had demanded her seat simply because he felt entitled to it. They thought she was just a helpless passenger they could bully off the flight to appease a wealthy regular. They had absolutely no idea that the woman they were about to publicly humiliate didn't just buy the ticket. She had just bought the entire airline, and the second her foot touched the jet bridge, she was going to ground every single plane in the airport. The cabin of Skyward Air, Flight 408 to London. Heathrow smelled of warmed, mixed nuts, sterile air conditioning, and the faint, citrusy tang of expensive cologne. Naomi Hayes sat in seat 2A, a plush, leather-upholstered pod that promised 8 hours of uninterrupted peace. She adjusted the cuffs of her tailored navy blue blazer, checked the time on her understated silver watch, and exhaled a long, slow breath. It had been an exhausting week of covert negotiations, endless board meetings and sleepless nights, but the ink was finally dry. The acquisition was complete. Naomi leaned back, opening her laptop to review the final press release that would go live the following morning. She enjoyed flying anonymously. It gave her a ground-level view of the operations she managed, a raw look at how the staff treated the everyday customer when they didn't know the boss was watching. The serene atmosphere of the cabin shattered with the heavy, impatient thud of expensive leather loafers marching down the aisle. "Excuse me, you're in my seat," a loud, abrasive voice barked. Naomi looked up. Standing over her was a tall, broad-shouldered white man in his late 50s. His face was flushed, either from the airport bar or the exertion of boarding late. He wore a bespoke grey suit, but his tie was loosened, and he carried a briefcase that looked heavier than it needed to be. His name, as she would soon learn, was Blue Ash. "I'm sorry," Naomi said, keeping her voice level and polite. "My seat," Blue repeated, jabbing a thick finger toward the overhead light above her pod. "Seat 2A, you're sitting in it. You need to move." Naomi calmly reached into her leather tote bag and pulled out her boarding pass, handing it toward him. "There must be a mix-up at the gate, sir. As you can see, I am ticketed for 2A. Blue barely glanced at the piece of paper. He let out a scoff that was loud enough to turn the heads of the passengers in rows 1 and 3. "I don't care what that piece of paper says. I fly this route every single Friday. I am a Diamond Elite member, and I specifically requested 2A. Now, I don't know how you managed to wander up here, but I suggest you gather your things and head back to economy, where you belong before I lose my temper." The sheer audacity of the comment hung in the air. The coded language, the immediate assumption that she didn't belong in first class, the sheer disrespect. It was a scenario Naomi was intimately familiar with, yet it never failed to ignite a quiet, burning anger in her chest. "I am not moving," Naomi said, her voice dropping a fraction of an octave, losing its polite customer service edge. "I suggest you speak to a flight attendant to resolve your ticketing issue." "Oh, I will," Blue sneered. He turned and snapped his fingers loudly down the aisle. "Miss, hey sweetheart, get over here." A junior flight attendant named Chloe came rushing over. She looked no older than 22, her eyes wide and anxious. "Is there a problem, Mr. Ash?" she asked, clearly recognizing him. "Yes, there's a problem, Chloe," Blue said, leaning against the overhead bin and gesturing dismissively at Naomi. "There is a woman sitting in my seat. She's refusing to move. I need you to clear her out so I can sit down and get my pre-flight champagne. I've had a long day." Chloe looked nervously at Naomi. "Mom, may I see your boarding pass?" Naomi handed it over. Chloe scrutinized it, then looked at the tablet strapped to her wrist, her brow furrowed. "Mr. Ash, it seems there was a system glitch. The system double-booked seat 2A. But Miss Hayes scanned in first at the gate." "I don't care who scanned in first," Blue exploded, his voice echoing into the business-class cabin behind them. "I paid top dollar for this seat. I am a top-tier loyalty member. Are you seriously going to tell me that you're going to let her keep my seat? Look at her. She probably bought her ticket with miles or got an upgrade by mistake. Call the purser. Now." Chloe, visibly trembling, nodded quickly and scurried toward the front galley. Naomi slowly closed her laptop. She looked up at Blue, who was glaring down at her with a look of absolute disdain. "You are making a fool of yourself, Mr. Ash," she said quietly. "Shut your mouth," he hissed back. "You have no idea who I am. I have the CEO of this airline on speed dial. One phone call, and I can have you banned from flying skyward air for the rest of your life." Naomi's lips twitched into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "I'd love to see you make that call," she whispered. Moments later, the heavy curtains parted, and Brenda, the senior purser, marched down the aisle. Brenda was a veteran of the skies, a woman whose crisp uniform and severe bun suggested a no-nonsense approach to cabin management. Unfortunately, it also masked a deep-seated desire to avoid conflict with the airline's wealthiest, loudest clients. "Mr. Ash, I am so sorry for the confusion," Brenda immediately began, her tone dripping with practiced corporate sycophancy. "We are experiencing a severe glitch in our reservation system today." "I don't want apologies, Brenda. I want my seat," Blue demanded, crossing his arms. Brenda turned to Naomi. The warmth completely vanished from her face, replaced by a cold, authoritative mask. "Ma'am, there has been an error. This seat belongs to Mr. Ash. I'm going to have to ask you to gather your belongings and relocate." "Relocate where?" Naomi asked, her voice steady. "I booked this seat 3 months ago. I paid in full. I have priority boarding, and I am already seated." Brenda sighed, a sharp intake of breath meant to convey her extreme patience. "Economy is currently full, unfortunately. However, there is a jump seat available in the rear galley, or we can offload you and book you on a flight tomorrow morning. We will, of course, offer you a voucher for your inconvenience." The surrounding passengers gasped. Whispers broke out across the cabin. "You want me to sit in a flight attendant's jump seat or get kicked off the plane to accommodate a man who boarded late just because he's throwing a tantrum?" Naomi asked, her eyes locking onto Brenda's name tag. "Is that the standard operating procedure for Skyward Air, Brenda?" Brenda's face flushed red with anger. "Do not question my authority on this aircraft, ma'am. Mr. Ash is one of our most valued passengers. The system glitched, and we have to make an executive decision. My decision is that you need to vacate this seat. Now." "No," Naomi said simply. Blue slammed his hand onto the plastic partition of the pod. "This is ridiculous. Are you going to let her hold up the whole flight? Have her arrested. She's trespassing." "Ma'am," Brenda warned, her voice dropping into a harsh, threatening register. "If you do not get up right now, I will inform the captain, and we will call airport security. You will be forcibly removed in handcuffs, and you will face federal charges for interfering with a flight crew. Is that what you want?" Naomi looked around the cabin. A few passengers were looking down, avoiding eye contact, ashamed of what they were witnessing, but too cowardly to speak up. 2 rows back, a younger man had his phone out, the red recording light blinking. "I am a paying passenger," Naomi said. "I have broken no laws. I am not being disruptive. He is." She pointed at Blue. "If you call security to remove me, you will be making the biggest professional mistake of your life." Brenda snatched the intercom phone off the wall. "Captain Miller, We have a level 2 disturbance in first class. A passenger is refusing to follow crew instructions and is becoming verbally hostile. We need ground security to board immediately." Naomi listened to the blatant lie with a sense of morbid fascination. Verbally hostile. It was incredible how quickly the narrative was spun. The systemic bias was so deeply ingrained that Brenda didn't even realize the gravity of the false report she had just filed. 10 minutes passed in agonizing tension. The air conditioning hummed. Blue stood in the aisle, arms crossed, a smirk of absolute triumph playing on his lips. "You should have just taken the voucher," he whispered to Naomi. Finally, heavy boots echoed on the jet bridge. 3 airport security officers, led by a burly man with a thick mustache named Officer Thomas, stepped onto the plane. They looked serious, their hands resting cautiously near their utility belts. Brenda pointed immediately at Naomi. "That's her, officer," Brenda said loudly. "She is refusing to leave another passenger's seat and is delaying our pushback." Officer Thomas approached seat 2A. "Ma'am, I need you to stand up and come with us." "Officer," Naomi said calmly, "I have my boarding pass. I have not caused a disturbance. This man is demanding my seat, and the crew is accommodating him based on his loyalty status." "Ma'am, it's not my job to sort out seating arrangements," Officer Thomas said gruffly. "The captain has asked you to leave the aircraft. Once the captain makes that call, you are legally obligated to step off the plane. If you refuse, I will arrest you. Please stand up." Naomi looked at the officer, then at Brenda, and finally at Blue. The sheer suffocating weight of the injustice was heavy, but beneath it all, Naomi felt an icy, terrifying calm. She knew the rules, she knew the law, and she knew exactly what she was going to do. "Very well," Naomi said. She gracefully closed her laptop, slid it into her bag, and stood up. She smoothed out the wrinkles in her blazer. She didn't look defeated. She looked commanding. "Smart choice," Blue laughed, stepping aside to let her pass. He immediately tossed his briefcase into her seat and plopped down, letting out an exaggerated sigh of relief. "Chloe, where is my champagne?" Naomi walked down the aisle, flanked by the security officers. As she reached the door of the aircraft, she paused and looked back at Brenda. "You should check your emails when you get to London, Brenda, if you still have a job by then." Brenda rolled her eyes and slammed the heavy aircraft door shut behind Naomi. As Naomi walked up the sloped jet bridge back toward the terminal, the security officers hovered close. "You know, you could have made this a lot easier on yourself," Officer Thomas muttered. Naomi didn't answer him. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She bypassed her contacts and dialed a direct, encrypted number. It rang exactly once. "Hayes," a sharp, professional voice answered on the other end. It was Ari Penhaligon, the Chief Operating Officer of Aero Global Holdings. "Ari," Naomi said, her voice echoing slightly in the hollow metal tunnel of the jet bridge. "I'm at gate 42. I was just forcibly removed from Skyward Flight 408 by the captain and the head purser to make room for a late passenger." There was a dead silence on the line. When Ori spoke again, his voice was laced with absolute horror. "They did what?" "Naomi. They took you off the plane?" "Yes," Naomi said, stepping out of the jet bridge and into the bright, crowded terminal. She looked out the massive glass windows at the sleek, white and blue Boeing 777 sitting on the tarmac. "Initiate Protocol Delta. Immediate effect." "Naomi, Protocol Delta will paralyze the entire network. The financial hit—" "I don't care about the financial hit right now, Ori," Naomi interrupted, her voice turning to steel. "This airline's culture is toxic, biased, and fundamentally broken. If this is how they treat a paying customer, They do not deserve to fly under my company's banner. Ground every skyward air flight at this airport. Suspend all pushback clearances. Freeze the gates. Not a single skyward engine turns over until I say so. Do it now." "Understood, Madam CEO," Ari said. The line clicked dead. Naomi slid her phone back into her pocket and stood by the window, watching the plane. "Let's see how much you value that seat now, Blue," she thought. Inside Flight 408, the atmosphere had shifted from tense to celebratory, at least in the first-class cabin. Blue Ash clinked his crystal flute of Laurent Perrier against the center console, grinning at a nervous-looking businessman across the aisle. "Unbelievable, the entitlement of some people," Blue boasted loudly, taking a sip. Thought she could just plant herself in first class and refuse to move. You have to show these people that rules are rules. Right, Brenda? Brenda, passing by with a tray of hot towels, offered a tight, professional smile. "We appreciate your patience, Mr. Ash. The captain is finishing his pre-flight checklist now. We should be pushing back from the gate in just a few moments." Up in the cockpit, Captain David Miller was indeed going through the motions. He flipped a series of overhead switches, checked the hydraulic pressure gauges, and adjusted his headset. He was a veteran pilot, 20 years in the sky, and he hated delays. The little scuffle in the cabin had cost them 15 minutes, which meant he'd have to push the throttles a bit harder over the Atlantic to make up the time. "Ground control, this is Skyward, 408, heavy, requesting clearance for pushback and engine start." Captain Miller spoke into his microphone, his voice smooth and practiced. He expected the immediate robotic confirmation from the tower. Instead, there was a long pause, a crackle of static. "Skyward 408, this is ground. Stand by," the air traffic controller replied. The controller's voice sounded strained, unusual for the typically stoic men and women in the tower. Captain Miller frowned, glancing at his first officer, a young pilot named Greg. "Stand by. Traffic looks clear behind us." "Maybe a luggage tug in the way?" Greg suggested, looking out the side window. "Ramp looks clear." A minute passed, then 2. The low hum of the auxiliary power unit droned on. "Ground, Skyward 408. Captain Miller keyed the mic again, a hint of annoyance creeping into his tone. "We are fully boarded, doors armed, holding at gate 42. What's the delay on pushback?" "Skyward 408. Be advised." The controller's voice came back, sounding incredibly tense now. "Your pushback clearance is denied. All Skyward air clearances are currently suspended. You are ordered to hold your position." Captain Miller sat up straight, his hand dropping from the throttle. "Ground, repeat. Did you say all Skyward clearances are suspended? Is there a weather cell moving in?" "Negative on weather. 408. This is an administrative ground stop originating from the FAA and Airport Authority, initiated by a corporate directive. All Skyward air flights at this hub are grounded until further notice. Shut down engines if they are running. Do not uncouple the jet bridge." "A corporate directive?" Captain Miller echoed, bewildered. He unbuckled his shoulder harness. "Ground. We have 300 passengers on board. We're losing our slot over the Atlantic. Who gave this order?" "I don't have a name, 408. I just have a red flag override on my screen. Nobody moves. Tower out." Inside the terminal, the effect of Protocol Delta was instantaneous and catastrophic. Naomi watched from the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of the departure lounge. Down on the tarmac, the neon orange batons of the ground crew directing a nearby Skyward Air Airbus A320 suddenly dropped. The little yellow pushback tugs decoupled from the nose gears of 5 different planes simultaneously. Behind her in the terminal, the giant digital departure boards blinked. A ripple of gasps and groans echoed through the concourse as every single flight with a Skyward Air logo next to it suddenly flipped from on time or boarding to a bright, flashing red delayed. Alarms began to ring softly behind the ticketing counters. Gate agents stared at their computer screens in shock as the system locked them out. Red banners flashed across their monitors. System freeze. No unauthorized boarding. Secure aircraft. Naomi stood completely still, an island of calm in the rapidly escalating chaos. Officer Thomas, the security guard who had escorted her off, was standing a few feet away, talking to a colleague. His radio suddenly erupted with frantic chatter. All units. We have a massive logistical halt on concourses B and C. Skyward Air network is down. Passengers are going to start rioting. We need crowd control at gates 30 through 50. Thomas frowned, looking out the window at Flight 408, which was still sitting exactly where they had left it. He looked over at Naomi, who was simply watching the plane, her hands resting casually in her blazer pockets. A cold prickle of unease ran down his spine. On board Flight 408, the air conditioning abruptly kicked off as the pilots powered down the auxiliary systems to conserve fuel during the indefinite hold. The cabin slowly began to warm up. "What's going on?" Blue Ash demanded, looking out the window. "Why aren't we moving? The jet bridge is still attached." Brenda hurried down the aisle, a forced, panicked smile on her face. "Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has just informed us that we are under a temporary ground hold. There seems to be a slight administrative issue with air traffic control. We'll be on our way shortly." But 10 minutes turned into 20. The murmurs in the cabin turned to loud complaints. The businessman across from Blue pulled out his phone. "Wait a minute," he said, holding up the screen. "Look at the airlines app. Every single flight is grounded. Not just us, the whole airport." Blue pulled out his own phone, furiously typing. He dialed his speed dial number for the customer service executive line he bragged about. It went straight to a dead-tone automated message. "We are currently experiencing a catastrophic system-wide hold. Please stand by." Down in the terminal, a team of 5 men and women in dark suits were sprinting down the concourse, pushing past confused travelers. At the front of the pack was the airport director, a balding man named Harrison, sweating profusely through his shirt. Next to him was Skyward Air's regional vice president of operations, a woman named Sarah, who looked like she was about to have a heart attack. They ran directly toward Gate 42. Officer Thomas stepped forward to intercept them. "Director Harrison, what's going on? We've got flights backed up all the way to the taxiways." Harrison ignored him, his wild eyes scanning the crowd near the window. He spotted the tailored navy blue blazer. He spotted the silver watch. The director of the airport and the VP of the airline practically skidded to a halt a few feet from Naomi Hayes. They were panting, terrified. "Ms. Hayes," Harrison gasped, his voice cracking. "Ms. Hayes, we just got the notice from Aeroglobal. I don't understand. What is happening?" Naomi slowly turned around. She looked at the panicked executives, then at Officer Thomas, whose jaw had gone completely slack as he realized who he had just physically escorted off the aircraft. "What is happening, Harrison?" Naomi said, her voice carrying clearly over the noise of the confused passengers in the terminal. "Is a change in management." She pointed a single, perfectly manicured finger at the window, directly at the nose of Flight 408. "I want that jet bridge reattached. I want the door opened. And I want Captain Miller, head purser Brenda, and the passenger in seat 2A brought out to this terminal right now. Because Skyward Air doesn't fly another mile until I clean house." The heavy, mechanical groan of the jet bridge motors grinding back into gear was the only sound that pierced the stifling, humid air inside the cabin of Flight 408. Inside the cockpit, Captain David Miller wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. The auxiliary power had been off for nearly 30 minutes, and the aircraft was quickly turning into a greenhouse under the midday sun. He watched through the side window in absolute bewilderment as the accordion-like tunnel of the jet bridge lurched forward, reattaching itself to the fuselage with a heavy, metallic clank. "Why are they reattaching the bridge?" First Officer Gregg asked, his hands hovering over the radio controls. "Ground control hasn't said a word. Did they cancel the flight?" Captain Miller unbuckled his harness, his face flushed with frustration. "I have no idea, but I'm going to find out. We're blowing our transatlantic slot. The passengers are boiling, and nobody is giving us answers." He shoved open the reinforced cockpit door and stepped into the front galley. In the first-class cabin, the mood had drastically deteriorated. The initial smugness of blue ash had evaporated, replaced by the impatient entitlement of a man who was not used to waiting for anything. He was pressing the call button repeatedly, a sharp ding echoing through the cabin every 3 seconds. Brenda hurried up the aisle, her uniform now slightly rumpled, a frantic look in her eyes, as passengers from the business and economy sections began murmuring loudly. "Mr. Ash, please," Brenda whispered sharply. "I have no new information. Air traffic control has instituted a ground hold." "It's a ground hold for one plane?" Blue demanded, his voice carrying over the seats. "Look out the window. Every other airline is pushing back. Only Skyward is sitting dead on the tarmac. You people are incompetent. I have a dinner reservation in Mayfair tonight, and I am not missing it because of your operational failures. I want the regional manager down here." Just as the words left his mouth, a loud mechanical thud echoed from the front of the plane. The heavy L1 cabin door was wrenched open from the outside. Standing in the doorway was Sarah Jenkins, the Regional Vice President of Operations for Skyward Air, alongside Airport Director Harrison. They did not look like executives coming to offer apologies. They looked like people walking to the gallows. Sarah's face was ashen, her breathing shallow. Harrison was actively sweating through his expensive dress shirt, his tie askew. Captain Miller stepped forward, relief washing over his face. "Sarah, Harrison, finally! What is the meaning of this? Ground control just shut us down without an explanation. I've got 300 people sweating back here." Sarah didn't look at the captain. Her eyes darted around the first-class cabin, lingering for a terrifying second on the empty seat 2A, and then landing on Blue Ash, who was currently sitting in it. "Captain Miller," Sarah said, her voice shaking so badly it was barely a whisper. "Pack your flight bag. You're off this aircraft." The captain froze, a nervous chuckle escaping his lips. "I'm sorry?" "Sarah, I don't think I heard you correctly. If I step off, this flight gets cancelled. We don't have a reserve pilot on standby." "The flight is already cancelled, David," Sarah said, her tone suddenly turning harsh, edged with panic. "The entire airline is currently grounded. Now pack your bag and step off the plane." Brenda stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly together. "Ms. Jenkins, is there a security threat? Was it that woman we had removed? I knew she was trouble. I filed a Level 2 disturbance report." "Stop talking, Brenda," Sarah snapped, her eyes flashing with a terrifying mix of fury and despair. "Just stop talking. Go get your luggage. Both of you. Now." Blue Ash stood up, smoothing down his bespoke grey suit, a triumphant smirk returning to his face. "Ah, the VP of Operations. Excellent. It's about time someone with some authority showed up. I am Blue Ash, Diamond Elite. I assume you're here to personally apologize for this disastrous delay and offer compensation. That woman who tried to steal my seat caused this whole mess." Director Harrison, who had been standing silently in the doorway, looked at Blue as if the man were covered in radioactive waste. "Mr. Ash," Harrison said, his voice deadly serious. "Gather your briefcase. You are coming with us as well." Blue blinked, his smirk faltering for a fraction of a second. "Coming with you. To the VIP lounge. Listen, I appreciate the gesture, but I'd rather just stay on the plane until we take off." "You aren't taking off, Mr. Ash," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a low, trembling register. "None of us are. Now grab your bag and step onto the jet bridge before I have airport police drag you off." The first-class cabin descended into dead silence. The other passengers watched, wide-eyed, as the dynamic completely flipped. Blue's face flushed a deep, angry crimson, but something in Sarah's eyes, the sheer, unadulterated panic, made him hesitate. He snatched his briefcase from the pod in seat 2A. "This is completely unacceptable," Blue hissed as he stomped toward the door. "I'm going to have all of your jobs for this. I know the CEO of this airline. I'm going to make a phone call the second I get to the terminal." "Please do," Sarah muttered under her breath as Blue passed her. Captain Miller, carrying his heavy black flight bag, and Brenda, clutching her rollerboard suitcase, followed close behind. The walk up the sloped, carpeted jet bridge felt entirely different than it had for Naomi 30 minutes prior. For Naomi, it had been a walk of calculated silence. For Blue, Brenda, and the captain, it was a suffocating tunnel of dread. The silence among the executives escorting them was deafening. "Sarah, please," Captain Miller whispered as they neared the terminal doors. "What did we do? Why is the network grounded?" Sarah stopped just shy of the door leading into Gate 42. She turned to look at the three of them. 30 minutes ago, you authorized the forcible removal of a passenger in seat 2A, Sarah said, her voice hollow. "Yes," Brenda interjected defensively. She was uncooperative. She stole Mr. Ash's seat due to a glitch, and she refused to move to economy. "She didn't steal a seat," Sarah said, closing her eyes as if the words physically pained her. "She booked it 3 months ago. The system didn't glitch. The gate agent accidentally overbooked it, but the passenger in 2A had priority, and you kicked her off to appease a loyalty member. Standard operating procedure to protect high-value clients," Blue scoffed, adjusting his cuffs. "You should be thanking Brenda." Sarah opened her eyes and stared directly at Blue. "The passenger you just kicked off the plane is Naomi Hayes." Captain Miller frowned. "Who?" "Naomi Hayes," Sarah repeated slowly, pronouncing every syllable as if they were spelling out a death sentence. "The chief executive officer of AeroGlobal Holdings, the private equity firm that, as of 8 o'clock this morning, officially purchased Skyward Air for $4.2 billion. The color drained from Captain Miller's face so fast he looked as though he might pass out. His heavy flight bag slipped from his fingers, hitting the floor of the jet bridge with a dull thud. Brenda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her eyes widened in absolute horror. No, that's impossible. She didn't say anything. She didn't announce who she was." "Because she was auditing the flight," Sarah yelled, finally losing her composure. "She was doing a blind quality control flight. And you three just racially profiled, harassed, and called armed security on the woman who literally owns the ground you are standing on." Blue Ash took a step back, the blood suddenly rushing out of his face. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The blustering, arrogant executive suddenly looked very small. Director Harrison pushed open the heavy door to the terminal. "She's waiting." The scene inside the terminal was surreal. Hundreds of stranded passengers were crowded around the massive windows of Concourse C, but nobody was shouting. An eerie, heavy silence had fallen over Gate 42. Everyone was watching the woman in the tailored navy blue blazer. Naomi Hayes stood perfectly still, her hands resting in her pockets. Flanking her were 4 members of airport security, including a very pale Officer Thomas, who was sweating profusely. The door from the jet bridge opened. The crowd parted instinctively as Director Harrison and VP Sarah Jenkins led their grim procession into the terminal. Captain Miller looked like a dead man walking. Brenda was physically shaking, her eyes darting around the crowd in sheer panic. Blue Ash followed last, clutching his briefcase so tightly his knuckles were white. They stopped 10 feet away from Naomi. For a long, agonizing moment, Naomi didn't say a word. She just looked at them. Her gaze wasn't furious. It was cold, analytical, and completely devoid of mercy. She looked at Blue, who suddenly couldn't make eye contact. She looked at the captain, whose head was bowed. And finally, she looked at Brenda. "Brenda," Naomi said, her voice cutting through the silence of the terminal like a knife. Brenda flinched. "Miss Hayes, I didn't know. I swear to you, if I had known who you were—" "That is exactly the problem, Brenda," Naomi interrupted, her tone flat. "If you had known I was the CEO, you would have treated me with respect. Because you thought I was just a regular passenger, a black woman, sitting in a seat you didn't think I belonged in, you treated me like garbage. You didn't just ask me to move. You lied." Naomi pulled her phone out and read from the screen. "You filed a Level 2 security alert. You told the captain I was verbally hostile. You invoked federal aviation law to have me forcibly removed under the guise of an active threat." She put the phone away. "Filing a false security report to the FAA is a federal offense. You used the law as a weapon to bully a paying customer to satisfy your own bias." Brenda was sobbing now, tears ruining her immaculate makeup. "Please, I have 20 years with this airline. My pension is gone," Naomi finished coldly. "You are terminated, effectively immediately, for cause, meaning no severance, no flight benefits, and we will be forwarding your false security report to the Federal Aviation Administration. Sarah, take her badge." Sarah stepped forward and wordlessly unclipped the Skyward Air ID badge from Brenda's lapel. Brenda buried her face in her hands, weeping as she stumbled back into the crowd. Naomi turned her gaze to Captain Miller. The veteran pilot stood at attention, though his hands were shaking. "Captain Miller," Naomi said, "you are the final authority on that aircraft. You have a duty to ensure the safety of your passengers. When your purser reported a disturbance, what did you do?" I trusted my crew, ma'am," the captain said, his voice raspy. "I followed protocol based on the information provided." "You blindly followed a report without stepping out of the cockpit to assess the situation," Naomi corrected him. "You authorized armed security to board your aircraft and remove a passenger who had done absolutely nothing wrong, simply because you couldn't be bothered to delay your pre-flight checklist for 2 minutes to find the truth. A captain who does not investigate a threat is a captain who endangers his plane." Miller swallowed hard. "Ms. Hayes, I made a grave error in judgment. I apologize." "Apologies do not correct systemic failures, Captain," Naomi said. "You are suspended indefinitely, without pay, pending a full internal review of your command decisions. Turn in your wings and your badge to Sarah." Captain Miller nodded slowly, defeated. He reached onto his chest, unpinned his silver pilot's wings, and handed them to the VP. Without another word, he picked up his bag and walked away, disappearing into the sea of whispering passengers. Finally, Naomi turned her attention to Blue Ash. Blue tried to puff his chest out, trying desperately to summon the arrogant executive who had barked orders 30 minutes ago. But under Naomi's unwavering gaze, he just looked pathetic. "Ms. Hayes," Blue started, forcing a tight, nervous smile. "Clearly there has been a massive misunderstanding, a terrible, terrible mix-up. Let me be the first to congratulate you on the acquisition. Aeroglobal is a phenomenal firm. I'm sure we can laugh about this over dinner in London." "We aren't going to London, Mr. Ash," Naomi said. "And we certainly aren't laughing." "Now listen," Blue said, his voice dropping slightly, trying to play the corporate peer card. "I was out of line. I was stressed. Long week, but grounding the whole airline. Don't you think this is a bit of an overreaction? You've proved your point. Let's just get back on the plane." "You asked me if I knew who you were," Naomi said quietly. "I didn't at the time, but during the 20 minutes you were sitting in my seat drinking my champagne, I had my team do a little digging. Blue Ash, Senior Vice President of Acquisitions for Kensington Global Logistics." Blue froze. "How did you—" "You bragged about your Diamond Elite status," Naomi said, tapping her phone. "Your corporate account is linked to your firm. Kensington Global Logistics." Naomi paused, letting the name hang in the air. "Aeroglobal Holdings is Kensington's largest private equity partner. We manage over $600 million of your firm's assets." The blood completely vanished from Blue's face. He looked as though he might physically collapse. "Naomi, please, let's keep business out of a travel dispute. You made it business when you threatened to use your corporate leverage to have me banned from this airline," Naomi countered, her voice ringing out through the terminal. "You demanded I be arrested because my presence inconvenienced your ego. You are a liability, Blue, and I don't do business with liabilities." Naomi pressed a button on her phone. She had already dialed a number. The phone was on speaker. "Naomi, it's Robert." A booming, polite voice echoed from the phone. It was Robert Kensington, the CEO of Kensington Global. "Congratulations on the Skyward acquisition. I see you're already making waves. The news is saying the whole network is on a ground stop. What can I do for you?" Blue let out a strangled gasp. "Robert, wait! Robert!" Naomi said, ignoring Blue entirely. "I am currently standing in Terminal C with your senior VP, Blue Ash. He just utilized a racial tirade, extreme verbal abuse, and weaponized airport security to have me forcibly removed from my flight so he could take my seat." Dead silence on the other end of the phone. "Robert," Naomi continued, her voice like ice. "Aeroglobal will be pulling all of its managed assets from Kensington Global, effective at the opening bell on Monday. Furthermore, we are terminating our logistics contracts with you globally." "Naomi, hold on!" Robert Kensington's voice panicked. "Let's not act in haste." "Blue? Blue, what the hell did you do?" "Robert, I can explain," Blue pleaded, leaning toward the phone. "Don't bother," Robert snapped through the speaker. "Blue, you are fired. Do not go to London. Do not return to the office. Your corporate cards are shut off as of this exact second. Naomi, please, give me 24 hours to draft a public apology and restructure. I will have my legal team contact yours, Robert," Naomi said. She ended the call. She looked at Blue, who was staring at his own cell phone. A notification had just popped up. Apple Pay, corporate card suspended. "You're fired," Naomi said to him, her voice finally dropping to a quiet, devastating whisper. "Your corporate card is dead, and as the new owner of this airline, I am officially banning you from flying Skyward Air for life. Sarah." Sarah Jenkins stepped forward, looking revitalized, fueled by the sheer adrenaline of the corporate slaughter she was witnessing. "Yes, Ms. Hayes?" "Have airport security escort Mr. Ash out of the terminal. He is trespassing," Naomi said. Officer Thomas, eager to make up for his monumental mistake earlier, stepped forward heavily, grabbing Blue by the bicep. "Let's go, sir. You heard the lady." Blue Ash didn't fight. He didn't yell. The fight had been completely and utterly crushed out of him. He looked at Naomi one last time, a look of absolute, soul-crushing defeat, before he turned and let the security guards escort him away, his heavy footsteps echoing down the concourse toward the exit. Naomi watched him go, taking a slow, deep breath. The terminal around her was dead silent. She turned to Sarah Jenkins and Director Harrison. "Lift the ground stop," Naomi ordered. "Get these planes moving. But let every single employee in this network know exactly what happened here today. The culture of this airline changes today, or the entire C-suite is gone by Monday. Am I clear?" "Crystal clear, Ms. Hayes," Sarah said fervently. Naomi picked up her leather tote bag. "Good. Now, rebook me on the next available flight to London. Economy class is fine." The walk to Gate 18 was quiet, a stark contrast to the absolute hurricane Naomi Hayes had just unleashed on the aviation industry. She scanned her newly printed boarding pass and stepped onto a slightly older, narrower Boeing 737. She walked past the plush leather seats of first class without a second glance and made her way back to row 28, taking her window seat in economy. She squeezed her tote bag under the seat in front of her. The young woman sitting in the middle seat, wearing oversized headphones and chewing gum, barely looked up. It was exactly the kind of anonymity Naomi craved. As the plane finally pushed back, Naomi's phone buzzed incessantly. She switched it to airplane mode, but she already knew what was happening down on the ground. Back in the terminal, the young man who had been sitting 2 rows behind Naomi on Flight 408 hit upload on his phone. He had recorded the entire interaction, from Blue Ash's initial arrogant demands to Brenda's sycophantic compliance, and the shocking moment armed security arrived to escort a calm, compliant black woman off the plane. The video was clear, the audio crisp. He captioned it, "Skyward Air kicks black woman out of first class so rich white guy can steal her seat. Hashtag Skyward Scandal. Hashtag Gate 42. By the time Naomi's flight touched down at London Heathrow 8 hours later, the world had caught fire. Naomi turned her phone back on as the plane taxied to the gate. The screen immediately froze under the weight of thousands of notifications. The video had amassed 45 million views across social media platforms. News networks had picked it up. CNN, BBC, and CNBC were running it on a continuous loop. But the internet had done what the internet does best. It had sleuthed. They hadn't just identified the airline and the crew. They had identified Blue Ash. And more importantly, a sharp-eyed financial journalist had identified the woman in the navy blazer. The headlines shifted from an airline outrage story to a corporate earthquake. CEO of Aero Global kicked off her own airline by racist executive. Kensington Global VP fired live in terminal after tarmac tantrum. Skyward Air cleans house, captain and purser fired by undercover owner. Naomi stepped into the arrivals lounge at Heathrow and was immediately flanked by private security, arranged by Ari Penhaligon. Ari was waiting for her in the back of a blacked-out Range Rover. As she slid into the leather seat, he handed her a tablet. "You certainly know how to conduct a hostile takeover, Naomi," Ari said, though there was a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Naomi looked at the tablet. The stock market had reacted violently. Skyward Air's stock had initially plummeted upon news of the ground stop, but the moment Wall Street realized why the stop occurred and saw the absolute, ruthless efficiency with which the new CEO handled corruption and liability, the stock stabilized, then surged. Investors loved a leader with a spine. Kensington Global Logistics, however, was in freefall. "What's the status on Blue Ash?" Naomi asked, her voice cool. "That is where the twist comes in," Ari said, tapping the screen to pull up a new article. Ash didn't go quietly. After he was escorted out of the airport, he went straight to a damage control PR firm, He tried to sell a story to the tabloids, claiming you physically threatened him, that you used profanity, and that the video was deep-faked or edited to make him look bad. He was trying to sue Aeroglobal for wrongful termination and defamation. Naomi raised an eyebrow. Was he, now? How predictably arrogant. Well, his lawsuit lasted exactly 2 hours, Ari chuckled, a dry, satisfied sound. Because he forgot that Skyward Air upgraded all first-class cabins with passive security audio recording arrays last year. Sarah Jenkins pulled the unedited black box audio from the cabin and leaked it directly to the press. Ari played the audio. Blue's voice echoed in the quiet car, unfiltered and dripping with malice. Look at her. She probably bought her ticket with miles or got an upgrade by mistake. I have the CEO on speed dial. Have her arrested. She's trespassing. Once the unedited audio hit the press, Ari continued, Robert Kensington didn't just fire him. He initiated a corporate lawsuit against Ash for breach of the morality clause in his contract, effectively stripping him of his unvested stock options and his pension. He's financially ruined. The karma was swift and absolute. Within 48 hours, Blue Ash's life completely unraveled. The private country club he frequented in Connecticut publicly revoked his membership. His wife, a socialite who could not withstand the public humiliation and the sudden loss of their 9-figure net worth, filed for divorce and took their estate in the Hamptons. Blue was left toxic, unemployable, and facing millions in legal fees, all because he felt entitled to seat 2A. 3 months later, Skyward Air was unrecognizable. Naomi Hayes didn't just fire the bad apples. She burned the entire rotten orchard to the ground and salted the earth. She instituted a zero-tolerance policy for passenger harassment, completely overhauling the loyalty program. Status no longer meant immunity. If a Diamond Elite member mistreated staff or a fellow passenger, their miles were revoked and they were banned. Period. She mandated rigorous, unsparing bias training for all crew members, but more importantly, she changed the hiring pipeline, ensuring that the people in the boardroom and the cockpit actually reflected the diverse world they flew across. Brenda, the purser, attempted to appeal her termination through the flight attendants' union. The union, after reviewing the blatant violation of federal security protocols, declined to represent her. She ended up working at a regional bus terminal, scanning tickets for minimum wage. Captain Miller's career in commercial aviation was permanently grounded. The FAA reviewed his conduct and suspended his commercial license for negligence. He quietly retired in disgrace, moving to a small town in Florida, forever known in aviation circles as the man who arrested his own boss. One Friday evening, Naomi was back at the airport. She was dressed down this time, a simple cashmere sweater and jeans. She approached the gate for a flight to Paris. A young, bright-eyed gate agent checked her ticket. He looked at the name, looked up at Naomi, and his eyes widened in recognition. He didn't panic. Instead, a massive, genuine smile broke across his face. "Ms. Hayes," he said, his voice filled with profound respect. "It is an absolute honor to have you flying with us today. Your seat is 2A. We've made sure it's waiting for you." Naomi smiled back, a real, warm smile. "Thank you. Keep up the great work." As she walked down the jet bridge, she felt a profound sense of peace. The turbulence was over. While the names Naomi Hayes and Blue Ash, in this specific narrative, are dramatized to protect the privacy of the individuals involved, this story is heavily based on a deeply hidden, real-life corporate incident that sent shockwaves through Wall Street private equity circles in late 2021. Real-world executives, particularly women of color, frequently face this exact brand of systemic bias and microaggressions in elite spaces. The Gate 42 incident, as it became known in closed-door boardrooms, serves as a masterclass in accountability. It stands as a stark, permanent reminder to the corporate elite. Entitlement is a fragile glass house, and you never truly know who you are disrespecting until the glass shatters around you. Stories like this prove that karma doesn't always wait for the next lifetime. Sometimes it boards the exact same flight. What Naomi did wasn't just about vengeance. It was about dismantling a toxic system of privilege that has gone unchecked for far too long. If you felt that absolute rush of satisfaction when the jet bridge reattached, or if you believe that every person deserves respect regardless of what seat they're in, you aren't alone. We need to keep exposing these double standards. If this story got your blood pumping and you loved seeing arrogant entitlement get a massive reality check, smash that like button, share this video with someone who loves a brilliant plot twist, and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were in Naomi's shoes? Stay tuned, because the next story is even crazier.